what do you do when somebody who is a high-level individual is savvy and they understand the moral limitations of our country? And so instead of just driving by themselves or their courier, whoever it may be, they're just always going to drive around in a vehicle with their wife and kids. You know, where is that line? Who can make that decision? Who has to live with that decision? Trump eases rules on military raids and airstrikes, expanding range of who can be targeted. President Trump has made it easier for U.S. military commanders to approve raids and airstrikes by giving them more authority and reducing the number of approvals needed. This change allows for quicker action against terrorist groups and other threats. The new rules expand the list of targets to include groups like al-Shabaab in Somalia and the Houthis in Yemen. And even some drug cartels are now considered targets under this framework. I'm still to be determined on that one, personally, I think. While this policy aims to speed up military operations and make them more effective, experts caution that it could increase the risk of civilian casualties. This shift also brings back strategies used during the previous administration, which helped weaken ISIS. However, the long-term effects on military operations and international relations remain uncertain. The question being, with commanders given more autonomy to approve raids and airstrikes, how do you balance the need for quick action with the risk of civilian casualties and the long-term strategic consequences?
Yeah, I fall down on the side of you got to reduce the time it takes from identification of a target to pushing a button. It just we got to that point where, look, the Obama administration got drone happy, right? But the process to get approval to actually move on a target was unbelievably wieldy, right? It was just unwieldy. Sorry, I guess it's my lack of English knowledge. But so you had to go through the legal personnel at the White House and a variety of other layers to get that approval, and the shelf life on for the most part on all these targets is short. So as soon as you identify an opportunity, that window starts closing, and I think if you can move those decisions out to the field, you've trained and developed and promoted and put people in positions of operational responsibility. I think you've got to let them run with it. And, there's always I always have a problem with this. And I've seen this play out in really frustrating ways, the idea of, the potential for casualties. And we got to some point in our game here where it was like, well, okay, how do we get down to zero risk?
Good luck.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. It's just never going to happen. So I think it's a smart move. And whatever, and with the realization that sure, is there a potential for a fuck up? Of course, but assuming you've done your work properly and your target packages are set, then once you identify the opportunity, you got to shorten that time frame for making a decision.
You know what's shocking to me, and I've had quite a few conversations with people about this. For whatever reason, there is a misconception that Obama was not as kinetic of a president as other presidents. Mm. And he was a fucking savage with drone strikes.
Yeah.
And I don't know, how do people not know that? Was it just, because I was still in at that time, so not really paying attention, but how is that missed?
Yeah, it's a good question because it did get some coverage, right? And he
not
was
much though.
But he had a lot of top cover. You got to remember that, right? So I think there was a tendency to try to figure out how to, from the New York Times and others, how to cover it, but with the understanding that they don't want to drop the hammer because it's Obama and, he's aligned with them for the most part. I think it's one of those things with Obama that confused legacy media in terms of how to cover it. But I agree with it. He was, it was great. I think, again, the only problem, that typically flared up with that was, again, the time frame that it took between identification of an opportunity and approval. So, but it is an interesting point. I think people always considered, for the most part, they looked at Obama and thought, what, he's a peacetime president. He's such a pacifist.
I agree with what you're talking about, the flash to bang decision. I mean, I've been out of the game for a while, but even when I was in, I mean, you'd have times where your decision-making ability might be the length of a car ride for somebody that you have identified, or that they are incredibly signals intelligent, not SIGINT, but that individual is very intelligent about their usage, and they might come up for a brief period of time and you might have time to geolocate, and that's the only window of opportunity. And, depending on the level of the target and the level of risk, you're going to be going up for a theater commander. And
right.
I agree with you. At some point in time, you have to put the faith in the people that you have trained and put into that position to make those decisions. And I wish there was a way that you could reduce CivCas or civilian casualties or the risk of that. But also, what do you do when somebody who is a high-level individual is savvy and they understand the moral limitations of our country? And so instead of just driving by themselves or their courier, whoever it may be, they're just always going to drive around in a vehicle with their wife and kids. Where is that line? Who can make that decision? Who has to live with that decision? I mean, again, it's for as much as people want it to be like TV shows, there's real human beings who are on the spot looking at these things, having to make these decisions. And I don't have the ability or vocabulary to be able to describe the gravity that's involved in some of those moments.
Yeah. And that's good. I mean, you always have to make those calculations, and every administration is a little bit different in terms of the risk versus gain and the risk appetite. But I think overall, I think it's sort of like you go all the way back to the Gitmo days, right? And people imagined that we were just beating these son of a bitches over the head with pipes and 2x4s and it wasn't that way. And then, they did release a lot of the cable traffic, and of course nobody bothered to read it, but if they had, they'd see all this goddamn back and forth, right? Okay, can I do the following, right? Can I make the target, or can I make the detainee stand here? Can I put my hand on his chest and push him against a fake wall? Can I do, really just kind of, going back and forth? Well, I guess you could, yeah. And so, I think people always imagine, in part because of what you said before about the TV shows, people just imagine that, we see a target and, yeah, sure, he's with his family, but we'll blow him up anyway because it's,
The number of times I've seen that waved off, or a risk to civilians by being too high. My last deployment in 2010, the deployments before that, the kinetic nature would change, but our response from taking fire on the ground, if we had overhead assets, your fucking day is over. By 2010, the authorities that we needed, the permission that we needed, the amount of double checking and triple checking and communicating up and down the chain of command about the risk to civilian casualty before a drop would occur was unbelievable in comparison. And these are environments where you might be taking fire. I mean, not like standing out in the open and hopscotching around bullets, but you're actively engaged trying to, yes, I swear there is nobody within 1,000 yards. He is in the middle of a field. And they'd be like, well, what kind of field?
That's right. Right. Yes.
A field of grass. Well, is it mowed? No, it's not mowed. Is there rain on the horizon? There's no rain on the horizon. Can he see anybody that might see him be injured or killed and they would be damaged by it? I'm like, never mind, I'll just solve this myself.
Yeah, it really, I mean, it did get that bad. I know obviously we're exaggerating.
To a small degree, yeah.
A little bit, but for the most part, that's where it devolved to. And I think part of that is just because, everybody's got a smartphone now, right? Yeah. And everybody's got instant access to information. And, in the old days, could you imagine if people had smartphones and information access like we do now, and it was, D-Day?
Oh my God. Can you imagine somebody on TikTok? Yeah, TikTok live streaming D-Day as their freaking landing craft thing, and just everybody's vaporized. That would trend, but for all the wrong reasons.
Right. And then of course, then we would have stopped because public pressure would have said, "Oh my God, you can't do this." So it is fascinating, but again, I think it's a good move. Anything we can do to shorten that window. And take advantage of identified, credible, corroborated opportunities.
IRONCLAD creates premium content no matter the environment. From extreme elements to unforgiving terrain, we thrive on crafting content that captures the essence of your brand in the most challenging conditions. bring your brand story to life, ensuring your message leaves an impact. Ready to elevate your vision? Connect with us today at ironcladagency.com.
My only interaction with the agency from a targeting or intelligence perspective was post 9/11. And I don't know how much they did, probably with JSOC units, if anything, pre 9/11. What was the approval process like pre 9/11? I have to imagine it was glacial, unless it was, I don't even know what you guys were authorized to do at that point, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, I'll tell you the truth. A lot of the bureaucracy got laid on at post 9/11.
Really?
You could, I don't, I'm not going to tell stories, but you go back, 80s and 90s, it was, there was and again, it goes like this, right? The risk appetite. That's what I was mentioning before, is sort of it goes in cycles, right? And usually it depends on, how often you're getting your ass kicked up on Capitol Hill. But, the agency, over the years, had the opportunity to move quicker, I would say, than post 9/11. In part because, again, the scrutiny, obviously, that they came on, particularly after Gitmo and everybody's angst over interrogations, so but again, it goes in cycles. I have a feeling, we're on sort of this. Our risk appetite's getting better right now, in part because of the administration, and in part because of more of a focus on, let's just stay focused on our mission. Look, the agency is going to suffer the same sort of personnel reductions that a lot of other organizations are going to face. So hopefully, as they go through and try to figure out what percentage of agency staff gets cut and from what positions. I'm confident they'll do it in a smart manner. It's not going to be some Doge kid coming in there and telling them how to run their business. I think they're going to draw a hard line at that.
Big balls walls into a conference room. Like, you have 15 minutes. Tell me about your job. People are like, fuck you.
Could you imagine? Tell me, what do you do? This operation here.
Yeah. Tell
me about your sources and your methods.
Big balls wouldn't even know to ask that. He'd be like, so tell me what you do here.
Although I did have a polygraph operator one time in headquarters look at me and say, "You seem to know a lot of foreigners."
Oh my God.
No, it's like, well, really?
Yeah. I don't know if you know what we do here, sir, but that's kind of part of the job.